Okay, this is the analysis of the ASME A17 safety code for elevators and escalators. It's just Mike Anthony and Dave Flint on the phone right now, and we're going to record Dave's comments on his some of his observations on this here, but also he had some overall correlation observations between the NEC, what is it, Article 640 or something, and also ASME. So you want to go ahead, Dave?
It's Article 620 for elevators in National Electric Code. Scenario is I'm going to use one particular manufacturer, even though the majority of them use the information and codes with elevator controllers in the hoistway. Otis Elevator mounts their controller for the Gen series of elevators in the hoistway behind the second floor hoistway door. So if you have to work on a controller, but you can't move the car, how do you get to it to work on it? And they'll tell you that, well, you can drift the car, but you have to have access to a method to drift it in order to do it. So there's always an issue. If the safeties are set, you can't get to it because you have to release it. National body of A17 Standards Committee voted to approve that they could use a disconnect switch outside the hoistway anywhere in the building. And it didn't even say that it had to be in the same building. But the issue becomes that if, for the safety of the individual working on it, it should be within 25 feet walking distance of the hoistway door so that they can kill the power. And yes, there's a disconnect switch in the controller that they can kill, but if you can't get to the controller, how do you do it?
Okay, so let me back up, Dave. The generic, that's one of the NEC canons: grounding, disconnect, overcurrent protection, blah, blah, blah. So right now, so are you referring to language in 620.51? Is that this device here?
That's the one that they've recommended to change. Okay. And falls under A17 purview, but it's in National Electric Code. And A17 Standards Committee voted to approve that the manufacturers could put it anywhere they please. So that's our problem. It has to be in close enough proximity for the elevator contractor to have access to it and know where it's at.
Okay, so in play here is the cost of installing conduit and wire. This disconnect is what, typically a 200 amp disconnect? 100?
It can be 100, 200, depends on the size of the car.
Yeah, okay, and so when I'm looking here, you can see this on the NEC. There's a farther upstream, there is a generic requirement about the location of a disconnect from a motor, for example. I think in this case, the spatial relationship between the elevator disconnect, the elevator drive, I guess that's what we're talking about.
There's a difference.
It has to be within sight. So what? Let me finish, please. So what the generic Article 430 requirement is that you must be able to see that motor disconnect, but now in an elevator where you're actually disconnecting energy to the drive, you say that you disagree with what is essentially 620 committee saying the Article 430 criteria requirement for visible disconnecting means you would like to see it restored, or at least you want that elevator guy to see where he can disconnect the energy. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I want some kind of notice or something that's telling him where it's at, because unless he's in the hoistway, he doesn't know where it's at.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So here's the NEC, and this is the NEC as we know it. Now this means that we have a chance to modify it since NEC's in its mid-cycle. So we can do something here. Shall be located. So the disconnecting means where it's readily accessible. We argue about what's readily accessible to qualified
Absolutely.
persons. Yeah, okay. So this doesn't seem like an onerous requirement if all you're asking for is this, the disconnect is located in a certain location. So we don't really have to spend an extra amount of pipe and wire. I mean, that can be you know, that's what is that? That's that could be a 2.5-inch conduit 208, for example, and all the other fittings in a place on the wall. So that doesn't strike me as rocket surgery. What's the so that's what the ASME committee, this group here, what would they want? Now, where is that shown on this document?
It's not shown on this document.
Okay, so we're really
It's not
talking
shown.
about an NEC requirement, aren't we, then?
We're talking about NEC requirement.
Okay.
Okay, and that's NFPA 70. But it was approved by the Standards Committee for A17 to move ahead with what the manufacturers wanted. Okay, now you have to have a conception of where the motor is in the hoistway. Okay, typically it's at the top of the hoistway on a machine roomless elevator, because that's what we're talking about, machine roomless elevators. Machine roomless elevator, you have a blade type disconnect next to the motor, which is within sight of. Then in the elevator controller manufacturer has a disconnect in there so that you can kill power to the controller. Now you have to have one outside the hoistway that's feeding power to it, but the elevator journey person that's working on it has to know where it's at, and it's got to be in close proximity so that he can shut it off to prevent an injury.
Okay, I see. So what?
So we're looking at 4 disconnects by the time we're done.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need the one in the controller if the one on the landing is in close proximity.
Mm-hmm. So the moving member, so what they're not showing here, you know, arguably, this doesn't really show the full.
No, it doesn't show the feed.
All right, okay, so one thing we can do, we can try to get this fixed. Right here?
Yeah.
Let's mark up this document. All right, we can get this. If there's any piece of this that we can see in the 2017 transcript, we can noodle around with this and kick them around. One thing that I often find is that these organizations are very reluctant to put pictures up. I've tried to put pictures of substation clearances, for example, and they feel that no drawing can accurately, they feel like a drawing will either do 2 things, well, both of which are bad. One is it will lock them into a single conception of how you meet a performance requirement. The other is that, and that opens them up to lawsuits. Yeah, and the other is just that it doesn't, it's hard to get people to agree on any one type of drawing that's generic enough and that makes them legally, because we're essentially creating legal documents here. And as you might have looked at a few legal documents, they don't really have a lot of pictures in the Westlaw books, do they? So it's all words. And
I agree with you, Mike, because that is the problem, is that once you put a picture there, everybody feels like this is the only way to do it.
yeah, okay. Well, some of the trade magazines are pretty good about this. I'm just wondering, you know, we can go to Mike Holt and talk about this. So, of course, the problem is that most people just talk about it. They don't put the issue in front of the committee. So that's what we do. And so I think some of what we want for tomorrow's call is to, let's prepare ourselves for comments on 620. And if I have to, do you know who's on the, do you know, do you have who's your person on on the 620? Does Elevator, you have a person on 620?
He works for Schindler Elevator.
Okay, all right. As of this morning, the NEC page was not working. Let's see if they fixed it. They have not fixed it. So I'm going to send them a message and tell them, fix the NEC. I'll just send them a message. I'll give them one more time. I'll give another 4 hours, but I've gone to this 3 times this morning already. Okay. All right. So tell you what, that's probably enough for right now. I don't want to run this, but that's one concept. I think it's an important core idea that even though we're looking at the June 1st deadline on this one, that meaningful ideas are also correlated with 620. Let's see what it says here.
And we'll discuss the other one tomorrow, if you so choose, because you invited Terry to it, and I don't know if she's coming or not. Did she reply?
She did. She said she would, and I'll assume that she's a good voice for Elevator U.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I'm going to stop this recording. This is short enough so that I don't have to go through YouTube to get it out there. So it'll just be part of a project record.
Still,